Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to the last video of 2023, which is absolutely insane to say. I thought we could do the same thing that we did last year at the end of 2022, and that is tier ranking every single book that I read this year. Almost like a kind of end of the year consensus on how I really feel about these books after a whole year of reading has passed. I'm definitely a different reader than I was in January when the year started, so we're gonna go through my final thoughts. If they've changed since when I first read them, we'll see. So I created a tier ranking to rank all of these books, and I also figured out how to put all of the books in order from January to December in the order that I read them. So we're gonna go through all the tiers, all my stats, all the books, reviews. It's gonna be a fun time. It's also gonna be a long time, probably gonna have a lot to say because I did read a lot more than I did last year. So we'll get into more of like a stats right now. So in 2020, I read 10 books out of 15 books that I wanted to read, so I did not meet my goal. In 2021, I read 53 books and I wanted to read 35. So this is where I started to read a bit more, where I got kind of more into reading. And then last year, I wanted to read 100 books and I read 129, so I surpassed my goal. And this year I made my goal a little bit higher than 100 books from 2022 because I feel like since I surpassed my goal last year and I've started to make more book focused videos, I've been reading a lot more. So I feel like I can up my reading challenge goal, and this year I wanted to read 120 books and I read 146, which is so much more than I thought I would. But again, it all comes back to me recording and creating so many book videos. Like, I read a lot for videos. But like I said before, reading challenges, reading goals, the numbers of books you've read don't really mean anything. It kind of just shows what you've been doing. But aside from the numbers, I've had a great reading year. I found such amazing books this year. I did read a lot more than I thought I was going to, but that's not in a bad sense. I did read plenty of books I did not enjoy, but it also has helped me and kind of shaped me into the type of reader I am right now, and kind of showed me the books that I like, what I look for in books, and I have more of a taste for what I like in books now the more I've read this year. So first one we have on the top is I Haven't Shut Up About It for a Reason. This is just like my absolute favorite books of the year. The ones that if you've watched my channel all throughout the year and you hear the names of these books, you probably may think of me not shutting up about it, or they're just books that I can't stop talking about or bringing up any chance that I get, and that's because I love them so much. Like, they are my ride or die books I will take with me for years to come as my favorite books. Then underneath that we have top reads of the year. This is kind of like a 4-star, 4.5, 4.75, like books that aren't my absolute favorites of the year, but they're like top reads, some of my favorite books that I did read this year, just not like the 6, 7, 10-star reads. And then underneath that we have Didn't Love But Recommend. These are books kind of like maybe a 4-3-star range. These are books that I personally didn't absolutely love. They're not my favorite reads of the year, but I would put them in a recommendations video. I would recommend them to someone who wants something like that kind of plot, that kind of genre. They're books that I personally wouldn't go out of my way and say they're my favorite, but I would recommend them. Then underneath that is not the best but not the worst. These are kind of like mid books that are like, they were good, they weren't great, but they weren't absolutely bad. They weren't my least favorite books of the year. They're just like a good old mid book. And then underneath that is I actually forgot I read this. There are so many books that I read this year, maybe not so many, but I was adding all the books that I read this year and kind of putting them in order from January to December of books that I read. There were so many that I genuinely forgot that I read, and it's so crazy. I've read so many books, and when I bring up a book that I read, I can kind of say the summary, I can say how I felt while reading it, but there are books that I've read throughout the year that I forgot that I even did that and even read that, and it was kind of just sparking my memory going through the books that I read, putting them into this tier ranking list. But right now, present day, where I am right now, I've forgotten that I've read some of these books. Then we have Simply Not a Fave. This one is kind of like a maybe low 3, 2-star reads, not a favorite book of mine. I probably don't recommend it. I just didn't enjoy reading it maybe. They're just not my favorite books. They're lower on my list. And then my last one is 2023 Would Have Been Better Without. So these are just 1-star reads. If I had my DNFs in here, this is where the DNFs would go. But yeah, these are just books that have been fine not including them into my challenge. I'm good without thinking about them, looking at them, reading them again. Well, obviously I wouldn't read them again, but you know what I mean. They're just like the bottom of the list of books I've read this year. Okay, and then there was this website that I think someone created, and it kind of gives you stats. It's called My Year in Books, and these are the stats that I got back. I read, like I said, 146 books. That is 104,000 minutes read. That is a lot of minutes. That is a lot of my life of this year. My top genres were romance, contemporary, and fantasy, and then my top author was Sarah J. Maas. My reading vibes were hopelessly romantic, and some of my 5-star reads were Kingdom of Ash, Love Redesign, and Queen of Shadows. So I read all of Throne of Glass this year. I read A Court of Silver Flames. I think I read, Crescent City recently. So I read a lot of Sarah J. Maas this year, but I wouldn't say she's my top favorite author of the year. I think she's just the top author that I've read this year. I've read the most of her books out of any author. Now let's get into tier ranking and all of the books that I've read this year. I'm pretty excited to go through these and kind of rehash how I feel about them and just my personal year in review, my wrap up, my final full wrap up. So starting strong, my first book of the year was Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez, my first Abby Jimenez book, and I wouldn't say it's my top read of the year. This is where it gets difficult. Okay, I do recommend it. I don't think it's my top read of the year. I would say I didn't love it, but I do recommend it. It's not not my favorite book by her. There's a lot other ones that I think could be like a top read of the year that I enjoyed a lot more, but I do recommend this book. I think it is so good. Then we have Binding 13 by Chloe Walsh. This one, I'm not gonna say 2023 would have been better without it because I am happy I read it. I've experienced it. I know what other people have read through the book. So I would just say that it's just not a favorite. I didn't enjoy it, but it's not that the year would have been better without it. It's not like the worst book I've ever read. It's just I didn't enjoy it compared to how much people love this book. Then we have Booked on a Feeling. This one I think I gave like 3 stars, but I honestly forget that I read this, so I would either put it there or I would put Simply Not a Even would have been better with it. I just did not like this. This was like one of the first romance books I read that I got the ick from. I just did not feel the chemistry or anything, but it took place in a bookstore that was really cute, so I will give it some redemption points for that. So I think I'm gonna do either I forgot I read this, but we'll do Simply Not a Fave. I just didn't really enjoy that book. So All the Boys I Loved Before. This one I read in like a blind dates with a book video, and I'm honestly happy I read it after watching the movie because I can picture it like perfectly, and I liked seeing what they took from the book into the movie and like what things were changed. So not the best, but not the worst. Like it wasn't the best book I've ever read, but I also had a really fun time reading it. Then we have Graceling. This is a fantasy. This was one of my first fantasies of the year. This was my first fantasy of the year. It didn't really spark anything in me that it made me want to continue reading fantasies. I honestly kind of found it a little boring. I think I'm gonna put this in I actually forgot I read this, unless someone brings this book up. Completely forgot that I read it. I never recommend it. I never really talk about it. How to Love Your Neighbor. I loved this book. This is one of my top reads of the year. I never talk about it unless it's maybe like a recommendations video, but this was like such a good contemporary romance, small enemies to lover situation. They were neighbors. One was like an interior designer, one's a real estate agent. It was really good. I loved the banter, the dialogue, the side characters. I'm pretty sure there was no third act breakup. Like it was really, really good. I do forget that I read this book, but I do know I did really enjoy it, like a lot more than I thought I would. Then we have Forever Never by Lucy Score. Honestly, forgot that I read this. I would put that there, but I did enjoy it. Like it's not my favorite book by her, but it wasn't the worst book I read this year. I think I would put like no, I think I would do not the best, but not the worst. I don't know. The story was interesting. It had like a mystery element thrown into the romance, but I don't know, just not my favorite. Then we have Never Lie by Frida McFadden. This was my first book by her of the year, and it sent me down a rabbit hole of her books earlier this year. I would say this is one of my top reads of the year. This is one of those like mystery thrillers that really keep you on your toes, and her books are so bingeable. Like I think I got most of my reading challenge done and a lot of books like into my reading challenge because of how fast I read Frida McFadden books. Like this one was so good. It caught me so off guard. I did not guess it. I absolutely loved this book. I read The Inmate by her. This one I didn't love. I would say it's not the best, but not the worst. I don't see myself ever recommending this book too often, but it was good. Then we have Bright Side by Kim Holden. I think I read this in Trying to Find a 5-Star video, my first one that I did this year, and I remember just being up at 2 a.m. finishing this book, bawling my eyes out, and I didn't love it. I would recommend it. Like if someone said, do you have a book that's gonna make me cry? Like yeah, Bright Side by Kim Holden will do that for you. We finally get to Magnolia Parks. I'm honestly surprised how early in the year I read this book. Like I think I read this maybe like February-ish, and it's so crazy to think that I read this book for the first time this year. Like it feels so long ago that I started this series and just found my love for Magnolia Parks. So this one we all know is going, I haven't shut up about it for a reason. You guys know I talk about this book any chance I get. I think it was like the first one I read where the writing felt so beautiful and so personal and made the characters feel so real in so many different ways and aspects. The quotes that came out of here, the way this book made me feel. One of my favorites. We all know I haven't shut up about it. Personally for a reason, but just because I love it so much. Then we have Daisy Hates, the first Daisy Hates, and I think I'm gonna put this in my top reads of the year. I know I say this series is like my top favorite series, but when I read Daisy Hates, I actually gave that one a 4-star. It wasn't my favorite out of the whole series, my least favorite, but it definitely is a top read of the year. Like you get more of the characters. I also love Jessa's writing in this, but I just didn't love the main characters in here, Christian and Daisy. They're not my favorite to follow along with. I do love them more in the next Daisy Hates book, but yeah, this was definitely a top read of the year, but I don't really talk about this one when I talk about the Magnolia Park series. Then we have One by One by, again, Frida McFadden. I'm gonna put this in. I actually forgot that I read this. I did not enjoy this. I think I gave this one 3 stars. I didn't really like this one. I didn't really like the ending of this one, and I don't think about it. I do forget that I've even read this year. And then we have The Perfect Marriage, which I'm really excited about. I heard like great things about this, but I think I'm gonna put this in Simply Not a Favorite. The storyline of this book and the plot of this book was so good. I was so interested in it, but the ending I just didn't enjoy. I just don't like this type of ending in a mystery or a thriller. I don't really know how to say that without giving the whole book away, but I just didn't enjoy the ending of this one. Then we have 7 Days in June. I don't know where I would put this one because I enjoyed it when I read it, but I don't ever talk about this one. I think I would put this in either didn't love but recommend, or actually I think I'll put this in not the best but not the worst. It's not my favorite romance of the year, but also not like my least favorite. I did enjoy it again when I read it, and some quotes in here are really pretty, but not my favorite romance. Then we have Magnolia Parks, The Long Way Home. This one tore my heart into 18 billion pieces and didn't even put it back together. It actually put it back together for maybe 20 pages and then ripped it back open all over again, but you know, that's what you get when you go into the series. Rock Bottom Girl by Lucy Score. I think I'm gonna put this one in Simply Not a Favorite. I didn't really enjoy this one too much compared to like her other books that I've read by her. Then we have Kingdom of the Feared. I'm putting this in top reads of the year. The first two books in this Kingdom of the Wicked trilogy aren't my favorite, but something about Kingdom of the Feared really did it for me. Like all of the romance fantasy tropes kind of came into one with Wrath in this book, and it really sent me down a rabbit hole of needing more of that. And that's why this is one of my top reads of the year, just because of how much I fixated on Wrath after reading this. Like I needed what Wrath gave me in this book and other fantasies, and that's where it all stemmed from and why I started reading so much more fantasy this year. So I just want to put it in my top reads of the year. I just want to thank this book for doing that for me because I love fantasy now, as we know. Next we have Anastasia by Sophie Lark. This is so sad to say, but I think it would have been better if I didn't read this. It is such a long book. It is also a fantasy. I just had no idea what was going on, and I don't think it's because it was a retelling, but I think it was just because the way the storyline was going and the pacing of it and the way that plot lines would come up, I just didn't really enjoy it. I wish this wasn't the first Sophie Lark book that I read, but I really wanted, again, like I said, a fantasy, and that's the one that I chose, and not a favorite like at all. Then we have Serpent and Dove. This one, definitely not my top reads of the year or one of my top reads of the year. I would say I didn't love it, but I recommend it. I think it's such an easy fantasy to get into. I think the storyline's really interesting. It was definitely a good book. Also, seeing how I was trying to get into fantasy, I think this is a good one to kind of start with. Then we have The Housemaid's Secret, which is the sequel to The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. I actually enjoyed this one more than The Housemaid. I think it had more plot twists and kept me on my toes more, and I was excited to see the ending. This one, I wouldn't say is my top. Actually, no, I feel like I don't really talk about it. I would say not the best, but not the worst. It's not my favorite mystery thriller. I don't really talk about it much, but it's not the worst one I've read this year. Then we have The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. I actually read this, was one of our book club books earlier this year, and I just personally did not love this one. I don't think I really like the groundhog trope that goes on in this book, so that may be a reason why I didn't love it. I also don't really connect to YA romances too often. I don't really read them too often, so I think I would put this in simply not a favorite. I kind of only got through it and read it for the book club, but I will say I love Lynn Painter's writing. I love the way that she can create a romance and make it feel like a rom-com, like such a nostalgic feel almost, so I do love it for that reason, but the book itself just wasn't for me. Then we have Things We Hide from the Light, which I think is an unpopular opinion. I think a lot of people, or what I'm about to say I think is an unpopular opinion, so I think a lot of people who read this is one of their least faves of the series and just did not like it, but I personally really enjoyed it. I think it's like a top read of the year. This book felt like the Lucy Score of writing that I love, and all of the characters that I loved from the Knock 'Em Out series in the first book. I like seeing the banter between them and like learning about new characters and the history of them, and I personally really enjoyed this one. Carrie Soto is Back. Like I forgot that I read this book until I look at it on my shelf or I'm recommending a book, so I know I gave it, I think, around 4 stars. I did enjoy it compared to like other Taylor Jenkins Reid books I've read, but I would probably put it in didn't love but recommend, because I do recommend this book. I put it in recommendations video. I did enjoy it when I read it. Yeah, just not my favorite read. Then we have Once Upon a Broken Heart. I would put this in top reads of the year. I just think the fact that this was like a fairy tale fantasy, I enjoyed that like so much. Like I love a fairy tale fantasy. I love the settings of it. I love the whimsicalness of it. And I liked learning about the characters in this one. Definitely one of the top reads of the year. And then we have Taste of Poison. This one I would feel like was not the best, but not the worst. It's not my favorite out of all the books in this series, but again, it's not the best one, best fantasy I've read this year, but not the worst, because I really did love the princess retelling. Then we have The Ballad of Never After. Honestly, I think I would put this in I Haven't Shut Up About It for a reason. I feel like maybe I don't talk about this a lot, but I feel like I talk about it more than the other books on this list, or it's definitely up there. One of my favorite books that I've read this year. What I wanted from Once Upon a Broken Heart and why Once Upon a Broken Heart wasn't a 5-star read, she gave in The Ballad of Never After, and I think I was in a slump when I read this, like a really bad one, and this one completely got me out of it. Like I was convinced I wasn't gonna read again. That's how bad my slump was. So shout out this book. I love this book. Definitely top list of books I read this year. Then we have My Dark Romeo. This book, I wouldn't say it's a top read of the year. I also don't think I recommend this one because of how interesting of a plot it is. So I would say it's not the best, but not the worst. I just think the main character Romeo, from where he started in the book to where he ended, crazy character development. I think some of the things he said was so out of pocket that it almost felt like comical entertaining at points. Like I could not take him seriously. And just the dynamic between the two main characters was so just not what you would expect. And it was just an entertaining read. Like I did not take this book too seriously. It just felt super entertaining. Then we have Daughter of No World. This is probably a top read of the year. I loved this book. I think it was so interesting. The storyline, it's so different from other fantasies I've read before this one. The main guy character wasn't like morally gray. He was just really sweet and kind. I feel like you don't really get that too much in fantasy romances. Plot went somewhere I did not expect it to go, and I really enjoyed her writing in this one. It was the first book I read by her, and it was just so easy to understand and get into, which I loved just so much. Then we have From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I don't know if I would put this in simply not a fave, or it would have been better without this book, because I truly just did not enjoy it. I think I gave it 3 stars, but I never really think about this book. I would never really recommend it. It's not a fantasy that I enjoyed. It was honestly really long and I feel like it was like maybe 300 pages too long, so I would say it would have been better without this book this year. I was expecting to like love this book. I don't know why. I think it's just because I've seen lots of people enjoy it, so I was excited to get into another fantasy series, but yeah, I did not really enjoy this one. Okay, then we have Then She Was Gone. This one is a top read of the year. This was like a mystery thriller type of book that really made me feel like uneasy, and whenever a book makes me feel a type of emotion like that or makes me feel something, I just think that's such an incredible thing that words on paper can do that to someone. So I did kind of guess what was going on, but it just kept me on the edge of my seat. I think I read this book in like a day. I loved it. I thought it was so good. Then we have Caraval. This one I would put in didn't love but recommend. I didn't really connect to the characters, but I did love the creativity of it and getting in the Caraval world and seeing all the things that Stephanie Garber could create. I do recommend it and I did enjoy reading it. Then we have This Woven Kingdom. This one I'm stuck between 2023 would have been better without, or I actually forgot that I read this. I may put it in I forgot that I read this. Wouldn't put it in 2023 would have been better without, I think, because while reading it, what I could understand from it I did enjoy, like the romance that was happening and some of the quotes in here I did enjoy because I do love her writing, but this book was just too confusing for me. I could not grasp the world and the politics of it, so I was just confused like 70% of the time, but that 30% I did enjoy. So then we have All the Dangerous Things. Honestly, forgot that I read this. I think I read a couple of her books. I think there's another one that's coming up, but I went into this book thinking I was gonna absolutely like be obsessed with it. It'd be like one of my favorite mystery thrillers, find a new favorite thriller author. But I honestly don't remember what this book is about. I've read 2 of her books, like I said, and I don't know which one was which. I don't know what this one was, which I think shows that I forgot that I even read this book because I have no idea what the plot of this was, but I do remember it being a slow build up and it just being underwhelming, or I was underwhelmed by the ending. Then we have Renegades. This one I think would be a top read of the year. Not my favorite book ever, but it was one of my first kind of like dystopian superhero type of books, and it was very interesting. It was different than other dystopian sci-fi kind of reads that I've read. It was action packed, there was lots of characters, it was very interesting. It kind of felt like a movie in your head, so I really did enjoy reading this. Then we have The Love Wager by Lynn Painter. I loved this book. One of my top reads of the year. This is a contemporary adult romance by Lynn Painter. I just needed a good fast-paced romance, and I knew Lynn Painter would deliver, and I did not expect to love this book as much as I did. I just felt the chemistry between the 2 characters. I thought the storyline was really interesting. She threw some tropes in there that I love so much, and again, I love Lynn Painter's writing, so this one really did it for me. Then we have Serpent and Wings of the Night. This one is another top read of the year. Like I said, Carissa Broadbent's writing is so easy to understand and get into. This one was so good because you have like trials, you have an enemies to lovers, you have an interesting politics, like the pacing was so good. Like this was like such a good book. I absolutely loved reading this. There is 6 Scorched Roses, which is the novella between this book and the second book in this series, and honestly, not the best but not the worst. It's a novella. I can't really say too much about it. I will say for being a novella, I think she did a great job creating these characters and giving like history and a story. And then we have the second book. Honestly, I'll put it in top reads of the year. This one was more politics based, but usually politics and fantasy books could bore me really easily, and this one I was very interested in. I kept up with. I was intrigued to see where the storyline was going to go with these politics that we were learning about, so definitely a top read. That series, The Serpent and Wings of the Night, was just one of my favorites of the year. Then we have Daisy Hates The Great Undoing, going right back up there. I haven't shut up about it for a reason. I talk about some of the quotes in this book so much. I've posted the quotes before. I think about it all the time. I listen to the audiobook of this one on Spotify like no one's business. The storyline of this one, the pain from this one is just unlike any other. Then we get into Flawless by Elsie Silver, my first cowboy romance of the year. This one threw me down a rabbit hole of one Elsie Silver's series of Chestnut Springs, just cowboy romances, cowboy anything, like country music, cowgirl boots, like all of that. It really did it for me. Like it threw me head first into the world of cowboys. So this one of my top reads of the year. Her writing style I love so much. Dialogue, side characters, the tropes, like it was so good. Then I read Fool Me Twice. This one honestly would have been better without. The storyline of this has like a sad undertone, which I've talked about before, but where it goes, I just did not like it. It's just not a favorite of mine. I would have been fine not reading this book this year, but I had it on my TBR for a while and it was pretty short, so I did read it obviously. Then we have the next book by the same author as All the Dangerous Things. This one, forgot that I read this. Actually, I'm gonna put this in simply not a favorite. Actually, I'm gonna put in forgot I read this. These 2 books, again, don't know which plot this one is. Then we have Heartless, of course, is one of my top reads of the year. Cade is one of my top favorite Eaton brothers. Like it was just so good. Elsie Silver knows how to write the single father trope. She knows how to write a grumpy cowboy. And Willa, one of my favorite like female main characters of the entire year. Like she was amazing. I loved her. Then we have When in Rome. I would say didn't love but recommend. It's definitely a good adult romance. I think the tropes are fun. All cute stuff going on, but I don't think it was my favorite romance of the year. I do love Sarah Adams' writing, but yeah, not my favorite of the year. Then we have Float. This one's not the best, but not the worst. It was good for what it was. I think the vibes of it were perfect. I think it's exactly what you expect from a book like this. So yeah, not the best book, but it's also not the worst. I had a fun time reading that one. beach read. 100% haven't shut up about it for a reason. One of my top books ever. I've made it a thing for myself that I have to reread it every single summer. I reread it this year. Next year I'm just like counting down the days until I open up this book again. Everything about it to me is just chef's kiss. I don't know why I connect to it so much. I just do. And I just love it. Like an incredible amount. And then we have Yours Truly. This one I wouldn't put in I haven't shut up about it for a reason because I feel like I don't really talk about this one, but it's 100% one of my top reads of the year. I love Abby Jimenez's writing. It was just, yeah, really, really good. Then Meet Me at the Lake. I think I would put simply not a favorite. I am happy that I read it because I did enjoy her writing in the first book that she wrote. What was it called? Every Summer After. This one I just didn't connect to. The characters or their chemistry I didn't feel. I don't like the way that they met. I don't know. Something about it just rubbed me the wrong way. I just did not enjoy this one. Then we have Heartless by Marissa Meyer. I'm gonna put this in I forgot that I read it. I'm gonna be honest. I don't ever think about this book. I think I rated it higher than I would right now. Like I think I gave it 4 stars when I read it, but I think right now I'd give it like a 3. I feel like it's kind of like a mid book to me, but I do think it was creative. I do like the Alice in Wonderland vibes of it. I enjoyed that. Yeah, I didn't really completely enjoy the book and honestly forget that I even read this until I see it somewhere or someone else brings it up. Okay, and then we have Happy Place. I'm gonna put this in I haven't shut up about it for a reason. Again, I may not talk about this too much, but I definitely don't think it's just top reads of the year. I think this is one of my favorite reads of the year. I annotated that book like crazy. I connected to the main character like crazy. I love the storyline. I love the way it was written, the dialogue, the quotes, the side characters. I just like was obsessed with this. It just felt really real and I was just obsessed. I'm gonna reread this one, I think, soon. Our Final Love Song by N.S. Perkins. This one I didn't love, but I would recommend. This one I didn't love just because the setting of it is like a camp setting, which isn't my favorite, but I think it was an interesting take on a romance or a second chance. It's kind of like a time travel romance, and I do love N.S. Perkins' writing, so I did enjoy this book, but it wasn't my favorite, but I would recommend it. Then we have Powerless by Elsie Silver. I think this is like one of my tops of the year. I don't know if it was the tropes of this one that I really enjoyed. I love the two of them. I also just love that it's just Chestnut Springs. Like being back in that world was amazing, seeing all the side characters, and it was just my favorite, or one of my favorites from the series. Then Indigo Ridge. This one was not the best but not the worst. I didn't really connect to the characters in this one. I do like the setting of it. I liked that there was like a mystery element of it, but I liked the mystery element more than the romance of it. So not my favorite in the romance category that I read this year, but it wasn't the worst one that I've read. Then we have One for My Enemy. This one I think would be one of my top reads of the year. I feel like I don't talk about this one too often, but I love the modern day fantasy of it and like the two families against each other, the Romeo and Juliet retelling. The quotes in here are like phenomenal. There's some like really beautiful quotes. I love Olivia Blake's writing. I think it's very interesting. I liked this one a lot. Definitely one of my top fantasies of the year. And I know I don't talk about it a lot. It wasn't in my like top 23 reads of the year, but it definitely was a book that I really enjoyed this year. Then we have The Friend Zone. I don't think this was my favorite, but I recommend it because this interconnected standalone series I really enjoyed. This one was just like a little bit insta-lovey, but again, I love her writing and I did enjoy it for what it was. I would recommend it, but it's not my favorite. Once More with Feeling. This one's simply just not a favorite. I didn't really enjoy the storyline of this one. I do like her writing. I think it flows really nicely. I just didn't love the characters or really like the storyline of it. Then we have Reckless, one of my top reads of the year. This is my second favorite in the Chestnut Springs. The storyline of this is a surprise pregnancy trope, and again, Elsie Silver just knows how to do these tropes. Like she is so good at it, but again, the side characters being in Chestnut Springs setting and all of that together, so good. Then Words in the Deep Blue. Honestly, probably would have been better without. I did not enjoy this book. I had so many different expectations going into it, and it just did not deliver what I thought it was going to. I did not like the storyline of this one. Red, White, and Royal Blue. I think this is one of my top reads of the year. I like the dialogue and the characters. I really enjoyed this one, and I don't know why it took me so long to read it. Then One of Us is Lying. Honestly, I would say this is not the best but not the worst. It was a fast-paced book. It's a YA mystery. I didn't really enjoy this one too much, but it was a fast read, so it's like not the best one I've read this year, but also it wasn't like the worst book I've read. Then Juniper Hill. Honestly, I would put this in simply just not a favorite. I could not connect to this one at all. Like the main characters, the storyline, anything about this one, I just did not really enjoy this one. Then Practice Makes Perfect. I would put it in the same one as When in Rome. I didn't love it, but I recommend it. I think I liked it a little bit more than When in Rome, which I think a lot of people usually like When in Rome first. I don't really know, but I like the male main character in here. I think his name is Will. I really enjoyed him. It was cheesy at some points, but I think it was really good. Again, I love Sarah Adams' writing. It was cute. Then Done and Dusted, probably a top read of the year. Guys, it was so good. Then we have Charlie, Love and Cliches. My year would have been so much better without this book. This is another one that gave me the ick while reading it, but there was nothing to kind of redeem that part of it. Like I got the ick and I also just did not like the story or the characters, so this one felt so flat for me. And I love Marriage for One by the same author, but this one I just couldn't do it. Then we we have Rewrite Our Story. It's hard because I enjoyed like the first half of this book, but then I think it kind of went downhill the more you got to know the characters and their history and towards the end of it, and I feel like it was a little bit dragged out. I don't really know, but I don't know. I would say it's not a favorite of the year. We have Happy Ever After playlist. I think this is the top reads of the year. I loved this book. This is my favorite Abby Jimenez book, or one of them. I just liked their dynamic in this book like so much. Then we have What Happens After Midnight. This one, not the best, but not the worst. I think I ended up giving this one like 4 stars, but it's cute. It's YA. It's fast paced. It takes place at I think like a prep school. I enjoyed the storyline. I thought it was very fun. But yeah, not my favorite read of the year, but not the worst. Then we have Only Love Can Hurt Like This. Honestly, I don't think my year would have been better without it, but I don't think it was a favorite. I don't really know what it was about this that I couldn't connect to, but I just did not enjoy this book like I thought I was going to. We have The Last Word. I loved this book. It's definitely one of my top reads of the year. One of those thrillers that really has you on the edge of your seat. Like your adrenaline is pumping with the main character trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And I really loved that one. And then we have Divine Rivals. I think I haven't shut up about this for a reason. This is one of my top reads of the year. The romance in it is very sweet and just romantic and just so good. And I love the storyline of this. Yeah, definitely top of the year. Then we have I Found You. Honestly, I'm gonna put this in simply not a favorite. This is just like a mystery that I don't enjoy. It's one of those where not a lot of like mini plot twists are happening. You're not like on the edge of your seat. You're just kind of following along the story until the end where everything kind of just like wraps up and you kind of understand what happens. You can kind of figure it out as it's going on. So it's not my favorite type of mystery, but it was still good, just not a favorite. Our Scorching Summer. This one, I don't think it was a top romance of the year. Maybe I didn't love it. I did like it. I do recommend it. It's a really fun summer romance. I did enjoy the writing of it, the characters, the chemistry, and everything was so good. Love Theoretically, another top read of the year. This is one of my, I think, my favorite Ali Hazelwood books. This is one of those books that I read and kind of forgot the plot line of it. Like I literally don't remember, but I do remember enjoying reading it while I was reading it. We have Good Bad Girl. This is Alice Feeney's new release this year. I think it's not the best, but not the worst. Only because I think some of her other books I liked more than this one, but it was still good. The plot twist got me. It definitely is a top contender, but not my favorite. Then we have Book Lovers. I gave this one a second chance this year. I don't know if it was my top read. I didn't absolutely love it as much as I love some of her other books, but I did like it. I did like the banter between the two. I think it was like top tier banter. I would recommend it. I feel like I do recommend it often, but not my favorite. And I think it's just because it took me a while to get into it and connect to it. Then we have The Atlas Six. This one I think is not the best, but not the worst. I enjoyed the characters, and again, Olivia Blake's writing is so just unique, but she lost me a lot with the science talk and the theoretical talk. Like it got really deep into that and really intricate with that, but the characters and the storyline aside from that was really interesting. Belladonna, I think simply not a favorite. I went into this thinking I was gonna absolutely love it, but it just wasn't a favorite of the year. That's all I have to say. Naturals, top reads of the year. I love the series so much. It's one of my favorite series of the year. Then we have The Summer of Broken Rules. This one, probably not the best, but not the worst. It's cute. You got all the summer vibes that you could want, like a Pinterest-worthy summer family vacation vibes, but not my favorite read. Then we have The Final Offer. I think reading this, it's my favorite out of the whole Dreamland Billionaire series, but I don't think it's my favorite romance of the year. I didn't absolutely love this as much as like thinking back on it I did when I read it, but I did like it. I liked the writing. I liked these characters. I liked the storyline. I would recommend it, but I don't think it's my favorite romance of the year. Then we have War D by Frida McFadden. Honestly, I don't know if I forgot that I read this or it just wasn't a favorite, or not the best, not the worst. It's definitely fast paced. You can get into it really quick, but it's not my favorite read that I read this year by her. Then we have The Grace Year. This one I didn't love, but I would recommend if anyone would want a story like this. It didn't really connect too much to the characters in it, but the storyline I feel like I connected to. Then we have Throttled. I would say it's just not a favorite. I think this is like a mid book, which I feel like could go in not the best, but not the worst, but I just did not really enjoy this one. I never really think about this book. Not a favorite. I do want to continue the series and continue on. I love Lauren Asher's writing, but the actual story and characters I don't think is my favorite. Then we have Scarlet Princess. I think this is maybe top, I don't know. I read this one really fast. It's fast paced, short chapters, an enemies to lovers type of fantasy. I would say it's like not my favorite fantasy of the year, but I would 100% recommend this book. Then we have Killer Instinct, one of my top reads of the year. This whole series is going to be probably in this row. This one is one of my favorites of the whole series because you follow a character that I really wanted to know more about in the first one, which I love so much. And we have Tarnished Crown, not my favorite fantasy series of the year, but so good. Life's Too Short, I think I didn't love, but I would recommend. This is in the interconnected standalone of Abby Jimenez series with the Friend Zone, Happy Ever After playlist, and then you have Life's Too Short. I did enjoy her writing in this one. Again, fast paced. You can read her book so quick. The way she has these main characters meet, I don't know. I just like the way that she does it. I like her writing, but it's not my favorite book by her, but I would always recommend her books. And Crimson Kingdom, honestly, not the best, but not the worst. This one was my least favorite out of the books in the series that I read. It kind of just felt like a filler book. Like it could have been like a novella, or it could have just combined with the second book or the last book. So then we have The 5-Star Weekend. This one I think is just not a favorite of mine. I've read a bunch of her other books that I really enjoyed, but this one's just not my favorite of hers. This one I feel like was definitely more towards her demographic of like mom readers. I feel like they would enjoy it more. I couldn't really connect to the characters or like the storyline of this book too much, but yeah, not my favorite of hers and not my favorite read of the year. And then we have All In, again, top read of the year. This whole series is just so good. The storyline follows another one of my favorite characters from this whole entire series, so I loved that part of it. And then Jennette McCurdy, her memoir. I don't really know where I should put this because it's her story, and I feel like I can't say I didn't like this book because I did enjoy the book. I don't think it was my favorite book that I've listened to or read this year. I didn't absolutely love this book. I would 100% recommend it if you want to listen to a memoir, if you want to know more about her story. Tomorrow. I think it was not the best, but not the worst, and I feel like that's surprising because I enjoyed it when I read it. Not as much as I feel like a lot of people enjoy this book, but I think it just took a turn that I didn't expect, and I wanted to go a different way so bad that it just wasn't my favorite. It wasn't my least favorite of the year. It definitely was mid thinking back on it. Then we have Powerless by Lauren Roberts. Obviously, we know where this is going. I have not shut up about this book since I read it. Literally since I read it. I'm currently rereading a book right now, and after I finish that, I'm starting my reread on this, and my audiobook I'm gonna listen to some of it. I think the chemistry of my brain changed dramatically when I read this book. And if you have read this book this year too and loved it as much as I did, you understand why I haven't shut up about it and why I love it so much. Like, all of the tropes you want in an enemies to lovers fantasy, like, you're gonna get in this book, and it is so good. Then we have Bad Blood, which is also gonna go into top reads of the year. This one is my second favorite, I think, or maybe tied with my favorite of the series. The way that the whole series comes full circle in this is just so good. And then 12 is a novella right after that. I would put this in not the best but not the worst. It's a novella. It's quick and short. It's not what I expected the novella, the kind of wrap up of the series, to be. I kind of wanted a little bit more from the characters in this. It's not what I expected, but it was still good. I love the characters, and I'm happy that they had a novella to kind of wrap up the series. Then we have A River Enchanted. I'm gonna be so honest, I would have been okay not reading this year. I will say I only read it because I love Divine Rivals so much, so I wanted to read another book by Rebecca Ross, but this one's kind of like a folk fantasy, and it was just so slow that I had to download an audiobook of this book because I needed to listen to it because I couldn't sit and read it without stopping, and just like, I did not want to finish it, but I felt like I had to. I will say the ending was more interesting, and like the lead up into the second book I feel like is more interesting, and the second book may be a little bit better, but I don't think I'm going to read it. I honestly did just not enjoy this book. Then we have The Prison Healer. This book, I think, being the first book in the series, it was really slow. I think the ending was amazing, and I recommend this book like all the time. I think it is such a good fantasy series, but it's not my favorite out of the whole series and out of all of the fantasies I've read this year, and that's going into the second one. I think is one of my top reads of the year. I loved the second book, not as much as the third, which we'll talk about when that book comes up, but I think getting more into the politics of the world and kind of more into the fantasy elements and all of that was really fun in this one. So then we have One Dark Window, another top reads of the year. This one was so good. It was definitely different fantasy than the other ones I read this year. It was gothic fantasy. The storyline was interesting. The magical system was interesting. It had a romance in it. It was really good read. And then we have The Problem with Forever. This one I think is not the best but not the worst. It's a YA romance, but it has kind of like a deeper theme and deeper things going on with the characters in it, so it was interesting on that aspect of getting to know the characters, what they've been through, but not my favorite romance of the year. Then we have The Only One Left. I really enjoyed this one. I think this is one of my top mystery thrillers of the year. I feel like slowly getting into the second half of the year I stopped reading a lot of mysteries. Like, I read a lot in the earlier of 2023, but then I kind of picked up more fantasies and stopped reading mystery thrillers. Like, I don't think I've read one in a really long time, but this one was really good. It kept me at the edge of my seat. There were little plot twists. I was trying to figure out the whole time of what was going to happen. One of the plot twists took me so off guard. Then we have The Brothers Hawthorne. I would say not a favorite of the year. I'm happy that I read it because I do like the characters from the Inheritance games, but it's not what I expected. It's not my favorite. Kind of disappointing. And that's the same as Things We Left Behind. I think it was, I don't know if it was not a favorite or not the best but not the worst. I think I'm gonna put that there. I just was disappointed in this one. It's not what I expected Lucian and Sloane's story to be, because from the first Knock 'Em Out book, they were my favorite out of anyone, and we didn't even have their book, we just had snippets of them. So getting their book, I was just a little bit disappointed on how the story of them went, and like I was just anticipating it so much, and I had my own almost like storyline of how I thought their romance was gonna happen that it just wasn't my favorite. Then we have Fourth Wing. I don't know if I'm gonna put this in I think I'm gonna put this in didn't love but would recommend. I think I rated this like 4 something, but thinking back on it, I would probably give this like 3.5, 4 stars. I don't think it was a favorite fantasy of mine. It was just so incredibly hyped up that I had to read it. I had to see for myself like what it was about this book that everyone loves so much. Not my favorite fantasy I read this year, but I do recommend it, especially again if you're getting into fantasy. I feel like a lot of people did that, reading it as their first fantasy book. Then we have The 7-Year Slip. I don't know if I should put this in top reads of the year or I haven't shut up about it, because it truly is one of my absolute favorite books of the year. I think I'm going to put it in the top one. I know I don't talk about it a lot, but I will recommend this book any chance I get. It is just so good and took me so by surprise. I did not think I was gonna love this as much as I did. The quotes in here are so good. The way that the main characters connect are so good. I love that book. The Blood Trade Illustrator. Gonna put this in the top. This was one of my favorite fantasies I've read this year, and I think it's because the build-up of the first 2 books was so good going into this one. You have so many tropes that I love, like found family and the forced proximity and like a love declaration. All of it was just so good. Like, I ate this book up. I loved this book. I loved the characters. I loved the way it ended and the way the series wrapped up. So good. Then we have Throne of the Fallen, which I feel like I don't talk about too much, but I really enjoyed this book. I don't think it was a top read of the year, but I think it was a really good fantasy. I loved the storyline of this one. I would recommend it. I just don't think it's one of my favorite reads of the year. Then we have Arch Enemies. I think this wasn't the best, but not the worst. I feel like this one kind of dragged out the series a little too much. Like, there were so many questions unanswered that still aren't answered in the second one. Like, I'm currently listening to the third one right now. I'm about to finish it, and I don't know. I just didn't love the second one as much as the first one, or as much as I'm enjoying the third one right now. Then A Study in Drowning. I really didn't enjoy this one. I'm gonna put this in my year would have been better without it. It's another folk fantasy, and I didn't expect it to be. And like right off the bat, I think I was like 30 pages in, and I was like, this isn't for me. But it was one of those books where I had to see it out. Like, I had to finish it and see where it was gonna go, because the storyline was really interesting, the cover is really pretty, and I really wanted to see what it was gonna be about. But I simply just did not enjoy this one. Then we have My Roommate is a Vampire. I think I'm gonna put this in simply not a favorite. When I was reading it was fast-paced. I read it really quickly. It's one of those books that you can just kind of binge and kind of get into like the Halloween spirit almost, because obviously one of the main characters is a vampire, but the romance I just could not see or connect to. I got the ick again in this one. They felt more platonic friends to me than romantically connected or chemistry with each other, so yeah, not my favorite. Then we have Red Queen. I think this is not the best, but not the worst. I enjoyed the storyline of this, but I thought the romance in here was going to be a little bit heavier, and I didn't really connect to that. I don't think I even connected to the characters, but I did enjoy the storyline of this. I feel like it's like a blueprint fantasy storyline for so many fantasies that I've read this year. Then we have A Court of Silver Flames. I don't even know where to put this. I still haven't even rated this book. It took me so long to read this. I think I just listened to it. I barely read it. I don't even know what I listened to. I think I want to put in didn't love but recommend. Like, I recommend the ACOTAR series. I recommend reading it. I didn't love this one because I don't even remember what I read or listened to. So that's on me. That's a personal one. Then we have Wildfire. I think this is, I don't know if I didn't love but recommend. It's not my favorite romance. I did like it a lot. I love this author's writing. I think the camp setting isn't for me, but I like the 2 main characters' chemistry, the way they connected and all of that. So I would 100% recommend this one, but I don't think it's my favorite romance that I've read this year. And then we have Hopeless, which is honestly a little disappointing for me because it's my least favorite in the Chestnut Springs, and I thought it was going to be one of my favorites. So I would say it's not the best, but not the worst. It's not the best out of the whole series. It's not the worst romance I've read this year. It's just not what I expected from Beau's story. But again, I love Elsie Silver's writing. I love the characters and the setting and everything, but just not my favorite. Then we have Maybe Meant to Be. I'm gonna say I forgot that I read this book. The plot of this book is not what I expected it to be, like at all. You kind of follow 2 different characters and their romantic interests and stuff, but I thought that those 2 main characters were gonna get together. So writing is fast paced. I just didn't connect to, like, I don't think anything about this. I never really think about this book either. Then we have The Grump Who Stole Summer. Honestly, not a favorite of mine. It was definitely an interesting story. It's kind of a second chance, but the main characters are very toxic with each other, and I didn't really love that aspect. I do like Ella Field's writing and her writing style and the way she writes stories, but I didn't really like the actual storyline of this, more of like the plot. Then we get into Throne of Glass series, Assassin's Blade. I would say it's like one of my top reads of the year. It's one of my favorites out of the series. Just reading the whole series and then thinking about this prequel and everything that happened, I'm so happy I read it first. I connected so much with the main character. The Dead Romantics, I think, is not the best, but not the worst. I didn't really enjoy this one as much as The 7-Year Slip. I enjoyed the magical elements, but it's just, I don't know, I think I wanted a little bit more from this book. Maybe that's what it was. I'm not too sure. Throne of Glass, one of the top reads of the year. I loved this series. It's one of my favorite series of the whole entire year. Maybe, if not, no. Probably my second favorite series of the whole entire year. The X-Hex, not a favorite. I think I rated this a little bit higher than I probably would thinking back on it. It's definitely good for the Halloween season, but yeah, it's not my favorite read. Crown of Midnight, one of my favorites. Probably one of my top 3 of the entire series. So good. Criminally underrated. I think it's one of the best in the series. Like, you find out so much that is the blueprint for the rest of the series in this book. Then we have Heir of Fire. I feel like this one's gonna be a little surprising and unpopular, but I didn't love this one. Obviously, I'm recommending it because I'm recommending this whole series. After reading the whole series, I now appreciate Heir of Fire a lot more, but while I was reading it, this one was just a little boring to me because it gives you a lot of new information, new world building, so it was harder to read and get into, but I definitely appreciate it more after reading the whole series now. Then we have Spells for Lost Things. This one is not the best, but not the worst. I enjoyed this one. It's another kind of magical witch story, but also has has kind of like a small romance in it. It was fun to go along, fun to read, but not the best read of the year, but not the worst. It was good for, again, Halloween season. The Kiss Curse I'm gonna put next to the Ex-Hex. Not a favorite. It was entertaining for what it was. I enjoyed like the witch magical system. It was good. It wasn't bad. It's just I don't think it was like a favorite of the whole year. Like I never really think about this book. Curse for True Love was a little disappointing to me. I think I'm gonna put it in didn't love but would recommend. It's not my favorite out of the trilogy. It's not how I expected the last book to go, but I recommend the trilogy all the time. Queen of Shadows, another top of the whole entire. Actually, might even put this in I Don't Shut Up About It for a reason because I love it so much. So much happens in this book that literally had me on the edge of my seat. So much comes full circle. So much is going on. If we're talking about Throne of Glass, I'm probably talking about this book or another one we're about to get to. Okay, then we have Love Redesign. I loved this book so much. I think it was one of my top reads of the year, but I feel like it's too low to even put it there. Like, obsessed with this book. I think I'm gonna put it in I Haven't Shut Up About It for a reason. I know I don't talk about it too much, but since reading it, it's like one of my favorite romances. It had everything that I loved. The tropes in it, the side characters, the setting, the banter, the history, everything was just exactly what I love in a contemporary romance book, and Lauren Asher's writing in it was just so good. We have The Right Move. I think I'm gonna put didn't love but would recommend. I think this book was just a little too long for me. I recommend it, but I just don't think it's my favorite book that I've read this year. I do think it was a good romance, and like for what it was, I enjoyed it, but I just felt a little too dragged out. Then we have Check and Mate. I'm gonna say simply not a favorite. Yeah, I didn't really enjoy this one. It was not what I expected. Again, I always say this when I talk about this book. I know chess was gonna be a big component, but I feel like it was a lot of chess and not a lot of the romance that I expected it to be. It's also YA, which I don't connect to a lot, so not my favorite. Two Twisted Crowns, one of my top reads of the year. This one is so good. I liked it a little bit better than One Dark Window because there's another character's point of view that you get in here and you get their romance story. So you're throwing in a new romance that you get to connect to and follow along with the way the first one ended and trying to wrap that up. It was so good. It was the perfect way to end this duology. Then we have Tower of Dawn, not my favorite out of the series. I would say I didn't love it. Obviously would recommend it. There was a character's point of view in here that I just really did not, or was not interested in. I understand why it was in there for the plot and the way the rest of the books were going to go, but yeah, this one kind of took me a bit to get through. Like the tandem read, this was part of it, and it just took me a while. It was good looking back on it, but while reading it, it was hard to get through. And Empire of Storms, I honestly feel the same way I feel about Tower of Dawn, and I know that's surprising. I feel like a lot of people love Empire of Storms, but I honestly forget what even happened in that one. We do follow along some of my favorite characters ever, but I think compared to the rest of the series, it's not my favorite one. I do think the ending obviously is crazy and one of like the craziest endings because of the way Sarah J Maas ends her books, but not my favorite out of the whole entire series. Then we have House in the Cerulean Sea. I didn't love it. I would recommend it. I think it's a sweet story. It's definitely different from the other books that I read this year, and I enjoyed it for what it was. I just didn't love it. Kingdom of Ash, we're putting right next to or in the same row as Queen of Shadows. If I'm talking about Throne of Glass, I'm probably going to bring up Kingdom of Ash. Masterpiece in my opinion. It is phenomenal. Everything that comes full circle into this book, the way that it ends, the pain that you go through for almost 1,000 pages is incredible, and I would do it all over again. Then we have Never by Jessa Hastings, which I haven't talked about. I honestly think I'm gonna put this in simply not a favorite. I'm gonna talk about this more in my wrap up in January for November and December, but I had high expectations for this one. I was really excited about this one, but it just did not do what I thought it was gonna do. It just was not a favorite book that I've read this year. Then we have Bending on You. I really enjoyed this book. I didn't absolutely love it, but it's one of my favorite, or my newfound favorite Lynn Painter books. It's YA. It is so cute the way that the characters meet and everything, but not absolute favorite of the year, but I would recommend it. I thought it was so cute. Then we have Legendary. I think not the best, but not the worst. I feel like the same way I felt about Caraval. I like the magical elements of it and what you're following along in the storyline. I do think the character that it follows in here and a little bit of the romance in this one I enjoyed. You obviously meet Jax, which is one of my favorite characters of the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy, so I enjoyed those elements, but just not my favorite book that I've read this year. Then we have The Christmas Fix. This one's not the best, but not the worst. It's a short little novella for like Christmas season, obviously. The ending was definitely unexpected and different than what I thought it was gonna be. It was cute, it was short, it was sweet, it was nothing crazy, but it was a fast, cute read. Then we have The Christmas Fix. I think this was not my favorite of the year. It didn't really feel like a Lucy Score book, which I talked about in the reading vlog where I've read this. It was good for what it was, but I just didn't really enjoy it too much. It didn't even feel like that holiday-esque, and I didn't really love the storyline really that much of the characters. I don't know, I didn't really connect to this one. Then we have The Naughty, the Nice, and the Nanny. I listened to this book. It was really short. It's another novella. I think it's like 4 hours, maybe even shorter. I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember even what this book is about, so I'm gonna say it's not a favorite just because I have no idea what I even listened to. I know know that it was a nanny and a single father, and that's all I can remember about this book. Then we have House of Earth and Blood. Is that what it's called? Yeah, I think that's what it is. The first Crescent City book. I think it's not the worst but not the best book I've read. I'm excited to read the second one in January just to see how it goes and get to the ending of it, because I heard the ending is crazy, but it's not bad. It's just not my favorite. We have A Winter in New York. This one I feel like is the same. Probably not the best but not the worst. It's a great setting. The romance I didn't love too much, and there was one part of this that really just bothered me a lot, which again we'll talk about in my wrap up in January. Then we have Supernova, which I'm listening to right now. I have not finished it, but I will finish it before December ends, so I included it in here. I feel like from where I am right now, I have about maybe a little over 100 pages left. I'm gonna put this in didn't love but would recommend. I think I love the first book out of this trilogy the best. This one has elements in here that I've been waiting to read about and find out about, but it's kind of like backtracking almost. I don't really know how to explain that, but I definitely love the superhero elements and following along with superheroes and their powers and all the action that goes on, but it's just not my favorite. I would recommend the trilogy. But then we have Ghosted, which I just reread the other night. I finished it. So good. Honestly, I haven't shut up about it for a reason. The reread was even better because I picked up on little things that I just didn't pick up on the first time around, and I just know the characters so well in the storyline that it was just so good. I love that book so much. And then I just read Ruthless Vows, which again we will talk about next year. That's crazy to say, in January, but I would say I didn't love but would recommend. I recommend this duology and these books. It just wasn't my favorite. Didn't absolutely love it. I did like it, but yeah. Okay, so that is tier ranking all of the books I read this year. That took a really long time. I just personally love seeing the visual of my absolute favorite books at the top and just following it along to the bottom, and like books that I didn't love throughout the year. Just seeing it visually, I don't know, something about it. I love doing this. Seeing my favorite books at the top really makes me happy. I truly am so happy that I found some incredible books this year, some of my absolute favorite books, some rereads that I love so much. Like, it was a really great reading year for me, not just in the reading sense but just in the reading community. Like, I feel like I've connected like no other this year with so many people, especially just creating videos and connecting on all of these books and reading the same books and talking about the same books. Like, it is just such a wonderful community, and I could not be more grateful and thankful to be a part of it, and that you guys watch my videos. Like, I again cannot thank you guys enough for being here this whole year. Even if you've been here since years ago or beginning of this year or sometime later this year, it does not matter when you have joined us on this channel. I just want to thank you guys so much for just being here and watching my videos, and all of us just loving books as much as we do. It is such an amazing thing to be a part of and be able to connect with people on something that we all love. There really is truly nothing like it. And I want to shout out our book club that we created this year. If you guys want to join us in January, we have picked our January book. It's on Patreon. It's subscription based. There's different tiers. You can join free for a week, see if you even like it. The lowest tier, you kind of get weekly updates on the books that we're reading, my final review at the end of the month. The middle tier, you get the Discord, you get videos for the books we're choosing, you get to help choose the books for each month, you get a video for the winner of the month. And then the top tier, you get extra videos from me each month. This month I put in me creating my reading journal, an unhaul of books that I got rid of, a little vlog of some random things, and you also are helping vote on books. You get an extra channel in the Discord. I do giveaways once a month. We also have readathons once a month together for 24 hours in the Discord. Everyone is so lovely. I seriously could not thank everyone that's in the book club. Connecting with everyone has been just so wonderful in general. So the link to the book club is in the description if you want to join us next year. At least try it out. All the tiers are explained more in detail on Patreon, so you can check that out. And again, I just want to thank you guys for giving me such a wonderful place to talk about books and just letting me be part of such a wonderful community. I could not thank you guys enough. So I hope you guys have a wonderful New Year's. I hope you guys have a wonderful 2024. We have lots of fun videos coming next year. I am so excited. I hope you guys enjoyed the tier ranking. Let me know some of your favorite books of the year, your top reads, ones you can't stop talking about, and I will see you in January of 2024 for our next video. Thank you guys again for watching and for such a wonderful year, and I will see you hopefully in the next one. Bye!